Recent medical research by Dr. P.C. Campbell and myself has indicated that Stephen Harper is one of the main causes of an outbreak of Tourette's syndrome. As you know, Tourette's is an unfortunate ailment of involuntary exclamations, often swearing, and that's particularly important because I was thinking of a way into speaking about art and a radical art and social change, and going back to Roland Barthes' work on mythologies, and in it he indicates is that the poor have left is swearing. When those in power rule over time, what they also rule is the language, the concepts, the words, the images, and they do so with a nuanced speech and an ability not only to cement their place, but to reduplicate, to perpetuate. And so that those who are outside that language often find themselves only with swearing left. I would maintain or art, which can be a sophisticated form of swearing, or cursing, or swearing an oath, and by way of a vowing to move towards something beautiful and whole, as Fenella has so wonderfully unfolded. Do you remember at the beginning of Job, and very early on, Job's comforters are quickly giving this victim of a world coming undone, of his whole world unraveling. He's being given advice, reasonable advice from his friends. And early on, he declares, in effect, you have all the reasonable words, and I only have wild words. Wild words. Which is to say that those who rule have the common sense, have the sound of reasonableness about their arguments. And one of the roles of the wild words, and again, another way of describing art at its best, are words that would subvert and nevertheless are nonsense to the ruling order. They point to things, call on things that the ruling sensibilities either build out or discourage, either shut up, shut out, or shut upon, so to speak. The task, therefore, if art isn't going to be what it predominantly is, one more vehicle for cementing the ruling order, then it needs to find ways of breaking through the common sense and creating a creative nonsense. Lima, Peru, 2000. Capital city, Lima, and if you went to the city square in May on a Friday in the year 2000, we would have seen the market in front of the presidential palace. And this, of course, was the era of President Fujiyama, the third term elected ruler of Peru, who instituted a security state. And under his reign in the third term, disappearances started happening, and corruption became rampant, and opposition was terrified. The ability of the disappearances to near quell opposition was strong. But on this day that we go to the market in May, this Friday, we see people come into the market to buy, to shop, and many people are gathered. And we see some people come with pails and others with bags and wash tubs. And we follow them across the square. And right in front of the market, facing the Parliament, they set up poles and they set up a wire, a rope running across. And then, as we look carefully over their shoulder, they take out of their bags big claws that look quite similar, same color, and they have poured water into the wash tubs and put in soap, and they proceed to wash what turns out to be the Peruvian flag. And in many wash tubs, they're at work. And then they hang these flags on the ropes and the poles in front of the Parliament. This is called the Lava la Bandera, the washing of the flag, which became a movement. In front of embassies in Paris and London and Stockholm, other people gathered to declare their opposition to the regime with wash tubs, flags, and they proceeded to wash and hang the flags. Of course, one of the tasks of imaginative opposition is not to get arrested. And if you had burnt the flag, that's one thing. You wash the flag, you're outside the experience of the ruling order, and sure enough, this caught the imagination of others. So theater, in this case, was used radically. Now, what happened is this helped consolidate the opposition. And so I would maintain that one of the functions or roles of a radical art is not only to speak truth to power, but to speak the truth of the powerless. Not only to speak as if words from heaven, but to speak the words of earth to heaven. And the task of the artist is manifold, I would maintain, if it wills to be a radical art. In 1973, when Pinochet was murdered, and I'll hold this up in a minute. When Pinochet was murdered, or pardon me, when Allende was murdered, and Pinochet was the new dictator in Chile, thousands of disappearances followed. These were young people and others who worked doing literacy, worked doing health, community organizing throughout Chile. And a group shortly thereafter became organized. These were the mothers of the disappeared. And as you can imagine, they were wild with not only words, but grief. And they, in great sorrow, had just found themselves really unable to break through their sorrow and their grief and to know what to do. A number of them were gathered in the cathedral in Santiago, Chile, and they simply gathered in a room like this around a table. And they just talked their sorrow initially. But they also, for the most part, were working class women or peasant women, some middle class women, and there were no men. And there are reasons for that, good and bad. But the point is that as they sat there, one of the sisters who had invited them reminded them of an art form that was part of the inheritance. And the art form was doing little cloth murals. And these cloth murals were made with figures, with this is applique, and they told the stories of the country, both historical but also the activities. It was a folk art. But what the people began doing around this table was to speak their sorrow with their art. They said, let's take that form, in effect, and they began telling their story with little figures of their child being taken from the house. So you have an arpillera of a car, two men, the house, and a hooded figure coming out of the house. And this is done on a little cloth panel. And these simple art form initially were shown around the group. But then when sisters who visited Chile began returning to North America and Europe, they began taking these murals. And these were the first newspapers to come out of, in effect, the first newspapers to come out of Chile following Pinochet's rule. These were how the stories were first told of the people on the ground in Chile through these small cloth murals. And what they did, as other art forms often do, is take a benign art form and play with it and begin exploring. And part of the exploration ended up yielding these. This became wonderfully engaging, but also a source of information and organizing across the world in support of the women and of the movement in Chile. Some of them, the early ones, the material would be made with cloth from their children's clothing. So many of them would be marked with tears as well. Now, we have the washing of the flag, we have the arpilleras, we have theater, we have a craft which begins in a very ordinary fashion and becomes more sophisticated. But the reality is that any art form is potentially a radical art form. So part of the task, as you look across the world where arts have a radical function, is they generally build on simply what people are drawn to. Whether it's song, dance, fabric art, poetry, theater, all are potentially radical, just as all are potentially the stuff to cement the ruling order. But those are two examples, and I would suggest good examples of what art might do and can do at its best. So, thank you.